What's up, everyone? Welcome into the Dear Miss Fantasy show with me, your host, Tera Roberts. This is the official mailbag show for Player Profiler. It is Wednesday, July 22nd, and we are heading full speed ahead into draft season here for Redraft. And it is training camp week. Everyone is arriving this week for the most part. There's some that I do think are going to straggle next week, but for the most part, we've got training camp starting here. So very exciting. No massive training camp news other than Zach Charbonnet going on the pup. That's expected. That does not necessarily mean that he won't be ready for week one. But realistically, a lot of guys that are dealing with injuries are probably going to be put on the pup immediately just because that often happens. Although, again, that does not necessarily mean that they will be on the pup to start the season. But it is something for us to keep an eye on for sure, because that is massive for Jadarian Price, right? Because Seattle has been trying to be very optimistic about the potential return here of Zach Charbonnet coming earlier than expected. So again, really good one for us to monitor here with him, because that massively affects that value there for Jadarian Price, who is a good value if Charbonnet does miss significant time, or even just kind of 6 weeks or so, just to kind of establish himself as the theoretical lead back there, would be good value in fantasy drafts, but it does remain a wee bit risky. But that's one for us to monitor as well. Jumping in here, before I do, guys, because I see comments right off the bat here. Sorry if I sound like I'm out of breath. I am slightly. I was kind of running around a little bit, and then I came in here and started the show. I should have taken a deep breath, but it's okay. We're all good. Starting off here before I dive into the comments, the topic for today's show is going to be running back draft strategy, because I've been noticing a lot more running back comments. Now, granted, I do a lot of content that talks about running backs, because obviously that is one of the big ticket items. That is one of the ones that is the most stressful for us as drafters to nail there, particularly with our early round picks. So a lot of comments around running backs. So I thought I would talk running back strategies, tiers, cliffs, must-have running backs, all that good stuff. And then right off the bat here, before I even got in, we have a comment here from Slim Reaper XO. It's a dynasty question. So let's go ahead and get started off with that one. That'll be good here. Dynasty question here. 16-team dynasty superflex. Just traded away Waddle for Adams, a 2027 pick swap, a 28 second, and a 29 first, all from this year's 101 team. Feeling a little bit iffy about it now. Thoughts? And then adds in some more information, right, in terms of comments here, that he is projected to be the number 2 team this year, for some more context. And then added in a secondary follow-up question to that one. They've got Chase Brown, Ramondre Stevenson, Jonathan Brooks, Chris Rodriguez, Joe Mixon, Washington. Which Washington? And do I pair with Stevenson? Do I pair Stevenson with a pick to trade up at running back 2, or let it play out? Strong contender. Thanks. All right, let's address the Waddle one first, because Waddle, it's a little bit of a very divided kind of camp here in terms of how people feel about Waddle's arrival in Denver. I see a lot of positive people that are thrilled, thinking that he's immediately taken over wide receiver 1, really going to be that, big field stretcher that they need there, that Bo Nix is going to absolutely love him. Smash opportunity for him. Yay. And then there's the other side there that is kind of more my side, that looks at that Broncos wide receiver room and what we went through last year and says, okay, well, we've got some problems here in terms of the fact that this is an extremely crowded, extremely deep room here. And the one thing that I've noticed in terms of arguments being made for Waddle and his fit there in Denver is that the positive side is that we do have a change in offensive coordinator, which is good. Positive all around, no change or no negatives there about the switch to Davis Webb. Should be a more productive offense, because when you look at the Broncos offense last season, they could have been a lot more efficient. Tons of passes, right? And that's also something that I want to note as well. I would not expect a massive uptick in volume, because they already threw the ball significantly, well over league average, towards the top there in terms of pass attempts in general. So I wouldn't look at this as a big increase in targets with the change in offensive coordinator, rather an increase in efficiency, opportunity to get more touchdowns, right? So if we're looking at it from that context and saying, there's not a whole bunch more targets that can be found in this offense, right? Because there's only so much you can physically throw the ball, especially when you do have a good defense, right? But again, they were already pass happy to begin with. They just weren't very productive with it. So if we're not increasing targets, right, that means we have not, and we haven't lost any of the receivers there. They're all still there. Although I do think that we're going to see a clear shift in the pecking order to where a guy like Troy Franklin will shift down, and we'll see the subsequent shift down of Pat Bryant and such. But when we're looking at there not being a massive increase in targets, right, and potentially a massive increase in touchdowns, you have to ask yourself, are we really sure that all these increase in touchdowns and touches are really going to go specifically to Jalen Waddle? Because the most glaring thing to me is that Waddle is the one player in that offense that is not 6-2 and out, right? It's good. Like it rounds out the receiving core perfectly. So this was a great move for Denver. I like them in terms of increasing their odds as a Super Bowl contender this year for sure. But in terms of that being the best fantasy opportunity there, I question it, especially once we get towards the red zone. I still think we see more of those targets go towards guys like Courtland Sutton. So while it is not a terrible opportunity, I think that you made a strong move here, right? Because at the end of the day, while we did see this hamstring started hamstringing there for Davante Adams last year, you have upgraded to someone who, if he is on the field, and Waddle has his question marks about, being on the field as well. So that is also one thing to consider. But Davante Adams on the field has so much more upside than Jalen Waddle in the context of the two offenses that they are in, with the LA Rams operating at their optimal level, or even like slightly suboptimal, right? Because the touchdowns were rapidly looking at Davante Adams last year. I mean, the red zone target rate for him was absolutely ridiculous. Matt Stafford got to the red zone and he wanted Davante Adams, right? They weren't super efficient in terms of the connections that they made in the red zone, but that was the clear target for him. So apples to apples as a contender, I think that's a fine move. And the fact that you were able to get what I deem, let me put the comment back up here for you guys, in terms of the pick swap, you being the better team, the second for 2028 and the first from 2029, I think you did excellent, right? So I love this trade for you. As a contender, I think it's a great move there. And even from a rebuilding perspective, if someone were to do this from a rebuilding perspective, obviously getting Adams is not ideal, but still the number of picks, I think it was a solid move as well. So covers you for the future and allows you to contend right now. So I like this trade for you. Second part of it there for you, you've got Chase Brown, Stevenson, Jonathan Brooks, Chris Rodriguez, Mixon, and do you pair Stevenson with a pick to trade up at RB2 or let it play out? I think you do. Because again, you've got those extra picks there. So you've got flexibility. I would take that, pair that, and try to trade up there because there's the promise, right? I'm optimistic about if Jonathan Brooks is able to stay on the field, but we don't have a lot of evidence of that, right? Chris Rodriguez, in my opinion, I'm more on the Bashal Tutin side, but even then, so if he is able to get the goal line touches and early down touches over Bashal Tutin, he will never have those passing down touches. So that automatically caps his upside. So in Joe Mixon, I fear, is never coming back. So at the end of the day, and Washington, Mike Washington, that's what you mean. Mike Washington on that one would be my guess there, which is, again, excellent handcuff potential there, but not a starting running back. So yeah, I would absolutely make that move. And I think that would round out your room very nice to get a solid RB2, Chase Brown as your RB1, and then you got some multiple potentials there for sure. So I like that. Good thinking. Jump to the comments here. Easy E says, hi, Tara, just stopping by to see how everything's going and catch up with you another day. Thank you. Appreciate you stopping by to say hey and always see your comments in my videos. So thank you so much for joining in. Shout out to John in the chat saying hi there, and then says, which rookie running backs are worth targeting in Dynasty? Very good question there. Damon Claiborne's on my mind right now. And that's probably because I was looking at tweets earlier today, and that was one of the ones that I was looking at, that there's a lot of positive feedback around Damon Claiborne there in Minnesota. That was one that I want to say I might have gotten him on at least one, maybe two of my Dynasty teams. I think I probably got two, right? That was one that I found interesting in terms of a target, because at the end of the day, when we look at that Minnesota running back room, I was shocked that they did not upgrade at running back it was a weird class, right? But it was a really good free agency class. So I found it peculiar. They didn't try to make any moves, knowing that the running back room was not effective last season, knowing that Aaron Jones is, God love him, on his last leg, unfortunately. And I struggle to see where you can put significant volume on him. It would have to, in my opinion, it is going to operate similar to what we saw at the beginning of last season, where we did see a lot of Jordan Mason there as well. Early down work, goal line work, and then obviously some work on the ground, but change of pace there in terms of receiving downs for Aaron Jones. And when you're looking at it from that perspective, Damon Claiborne makes a lot of sense, because if Aaron Jones were to go down, they would need somebody to replace that role. And Claiborne physically would be a direct replacement for that. So he could have the ability to he wouldn't have to overtake Jordan Mason as much as he would just need Aaron Jones to go down, which, statistically does seem like that would be in line for this year, given the age and what we saw last year. So if he goes down, steps into that opportunity, you would get an automatic role right there. So that's one that I think could see the field this year fairly quickly, that I would target for sure in Dynasty. Obviously, the high-end option would be Jadarian Price there. But other sneaky options, I'm not hearing as much buzz about Katron Allen in Washington as I would have expected to get a little bit more out of him. I think I would probably maybe lean the Jonah Coleman direction as another back to target, because obviously J.K. Dobbins has a timeline in terms of his ability to make it through the season. We saw the inefficiencies of RJ Harvey last season. So naturally, we've heard a lot of positive stuff around Jonah Coleman. So I do think naturally the possibility of him creeping in there and gaining significant work is it's worth a stab there. So those would be my three off the top of my head that I would prefer. Yeah, Slim Reaper says that you fear Mixon is done as well. I do too. That is top 10. That will go down as one of the weirdest situations ever. The disappearance of Joe Mixon, the ambiguity of his injury, the zero return kind of side. So this is one of the weirdest situations ever, right? Henry Odom in the chat says, when it comes to running back, the motto is follow the money. How do you view ETN as a RB1 or RB2? So very interesting. When it comes to Travis Etienne, I kind of like that we should be actually have the rankings shifted. Let me check, bro. I have way too many tabs open. My God. I just wanted to check real quick to see if we've already seen the shift down. And no, we haven't seen a big shift down. I thought we would see a budge in the rankings with the Alvin Kamara re-signing, but people aren't massively reacting. But I do think as people start to get a little bit more into updating rankings, as we get a little bit further into training camp, I would suspect we might see Travis Etienne drop a little bit more, because I think there's a lot of fear. And I'm just going to talk about this from a broad perspective real quick, and then I'll give my opinion. There's what I'm seeing in terms of when I look throughout, social media and content from other people, right? There's this inherent fear of Travis Etienne's value being decreased by the presence of Alvin Kamara, because a lot of people were thinking that he is going to go off to the wayside, be traded, be cut, something, right? So him staying there is automatically thinking, hey, oh my gosh, he's going to get the third down work. That is going to cap Travis Etienne to early down work in an offense that we're not 100% at what level it's going to operate. It could operate like last season and be productive, but again, there were still some kinks to work out in that. So it's a shakier offense, a running back. We've been relying on goal line touches. That's never really been a massive bread and butter for him anyways, in terms of being a guy that gets 300 touches and, 12 touchdowns. That's not really the Travis Etienne mode that we have seen throughout his tenure in the NFL, right? It's more, 250 carry range, some goal line touches, a decent receiving work, right? And just being very productive and efficient with that receiving work, particularly in Jacksonville, right? In the role that he had in the pass game. So I get the fear of what happens to Travis Etienne if Alvin Kamara is present. But I was kind of operating as if Alvin Kamara was going to be there anyway. And I wouldn't take the contract adjustment, right, as a sign that they have plans for Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara made it very clear last season that he had zero intention of leaving. They were not going to be able to trade him because he threatened, literally, if he, word for word, if they tried to trade him, he would be somewhere sipping pina coladas. Low key, that's saying you cannot trade me because I will retire, right? So he apparently wants to be in New Orleans for life, and I don't blame him. The food is fantastic. I mean, who doesn't want to be in New Orleans for life? And they couldn't cut him, right? Because contractually would have been very painful for their cap. So he kind of had to stay on the roster, and they did have to adjust the contract. So I wouldn't really take that contract adjustment as a vote of confidence in any way, shape, or form. He was going to be there by default because he refuses to leave. I do believe that Travis Etienne is still the lead back. Now, naturally, there's only so much work he can handle. So Alvin Kamara would still be logically present in the offense. But he was not particularly productive last season. He didn't thrive off pass volume. And, looking at Kellen Moore's offense, he's utilized running backs, obviously, in the pass game, more prolific running backs in the pass game, right? But it's not something that he forces to happen. Look back at Philadelphia. Obviously, Saquon Barkley, very talented as a pass catcher out of the backfield, but he didn't force a ton of volume that way. So I don't necessarily think that there's a massive change in the vision here and that Alvin Kamara is going to be a huge threat. If for some reason Travis Etienne falls and I'm able to snag him in like the RB20 range, like if he were to fall after guys like DeAndre Swift, Travion Henderson, maybe even a David Montgomery, I would look at it for sure, because at the end of the day, they signed him to be their RB1. But at the same time, I don't view him as being able to give us trustworthy RB1 production. So RB1 of that offense for sure. RB1 production, someone that I would trust to draft as my RB1? No, just based off pure volume, right? So that's the caveat there. Don't hate him as a pick. I have not been clicking his name, unfortunately. That was before the Alvin Kamara stuff, because again, I figured Alvin Kamara was going to be there anyway. So that is my point of view on that one with Travis Etienne. More RB2, low-end RB2 territory is where I trust him. But again, he is the lead back of that offense. Shout out to Sparty Debach in the comments there. Thank you for joining in. And it has the question, are we done with the Dolphins? Ooh, are we done on the Dolphins? Is there no value besides Achane? Oh, good question. Which is actually perfect because I'm going to talk running backs, so we'll lead into a discussion around the early round running backs and draft strategy after I answer that, in terms of, is there any other value besides Achane? Yeah, kind of, because at the end of the day, they're all late round dart throws. So it doesn't hurt to try and say, hey, at the end of my draft, I believe that Jalen Tolbert could have a little something, or I believe that Malik Washington could have a little something, or I'm not inspired by any of them, but in really deep leagues, once I get to the end of the draft, I do say, I'll draft one of these things. I do think, or, Caleb Douglas, he is the rookie, was overdrafted in my opinion, but at the end of the day, that was their preference in terms of what they wanted. But I will say this, we did see Chris Bell will be on the pup to start training camp. And I have seen people say, Chris Bell's the one that you want to own in this offense. No, it's not. In Dynasty, yes. In Redraft, I find it hard to believe that if we believe this team is going to be bad and tanking, and they're acknowledging almost, in the way that they have moved and made specific moves in terms of contracts and not contracts at certain positions, it does in fact look like a tank, right? So if they're tanking, why would they rush along a rookie who is recovering from an ACL injury? I don't think that, I think that's the Jameson Williams path that we're on for that guy. So I like him in Dynasty. I don't think it's the smartest redraft late round dart throw, because maybe if you have a whole bunch of IR spots and it's a very deep league and you want to throw it on there and see, But in my opinion, it reads more of a Jameson Williams situation where they're going to use this as a recovery, not rush him along. You might see him at the end of the season, but not to a degree to where it would be any use to your fantasy team. So just look elsewhere. And yeah, throw late round darts at any one of those suckers. Pick your preference, right? Go back and look. There's no clear recommendation for me on that one. It's your gut feel in terms of what you think could be of value in this offense in terms of the receivers. But yeah, they're late round dart throws. No investment whatsoever into them. And then, when it comes to Superflex, obviously I do like Malik Willis from a running perspective, right? Not going to be a ton of volume. He'll be theoretically should be super efficient because that's what we saw in Green Bay, but the rushing upside is what we'd like to see there. Now, diving into topics that I wanted to discuss today in terms of running back strategy here. Got a YouTube comment from user Mad Skills 7183 said, all the questions on running back splits has me leaning towards the possibility of drafting 3 running backs in the first 5 to 6 rounds, even in PPR. I like the wide receiver depth better than running back depth. So being able to get 2 starters and a possible flex is intriguing. I am with you on that one. I prefer a hero RB strategy, but it's a hero truncated RB strategy this season because with you, I agree, the last call point is round 6. So my preference in terms of my draft recommendations for people is that you need to grab your second running back by round 6. That is the last call spot there. As we get into training camp, we could get some more clarity. I mentioned, again, Jadarian Price, right? If Zach Charbonnet is not going to be ready, are they going to give this massive workload to Price? We should see the involvement of other running backs, but if he's the RB1 in a run-heavy offense, yeah, that is actually going to have some value. So we can push that back there. Bashal Tutin, another guy who falls right on that cusp. If we figure out that he is, in fact, 3 down back, that pushes it back a little bit. Other guys would be like, who else would be in there? Figuring out the Pittsburgh running back situation. Is either one of those guys between Rico Dowdle or Jalen Warren going to be a lead back? But these are all questions that we have to have answered in training camp. So until we can get more clarification that those running backs are going to be those safe, no fail situation, volume, good volume guys, my last call point is round 6. So securing your running back at least by that, but round 5 is my preference there, depending on how your draft goes and how far back it pushed. But early round is very straightforward for me at running back. And again, this is why I'm leaning towards heavier running back builds in terms of making sure that I come out, because when we look at these first 2 tiers really of running backs, there's a lot of extremely safe options. Running back is deep very early on this season. For all the lack of later mid-round options that we have once we get past like RB24, the first top 12 is really just kind of solidified in terms of really high upside opportunities. And I think you guys can hear my dog losing his mind in the background. It drives me crazy every single show. But looking at the tier 1 guys here, we'll run through tier 1 and tier 2 here real quick. Tier 1, and I'm looking at ECR. Tier 1 is Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor. I separate those in my personal tiers to a 1A and 1B kind of thing, where that tier 2 is for me is more of that Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, because I do think they're very separated from Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs in terms of safety there. So when I'm looking at them, you get your 2. If you don't have the early enough pick to be able to grab Bijan or Jahmyr Gibbs, it's that next grouping down here that I think you can bypass. And nothing wrong with drafting Jonathan Taylor or Christian McCaffrey, but the fact that you can come around to round 2 and get guys like Saquon Barkley. Looking at this next tier here, you've got James Cook, Ashton Genty, Javon Achane, Chase Brown, Saquon Barkley, Amarian Hampton, and then you can even dip further and include a Derrick Henry. There's Kenneth Walker, who again is a little bit shakier, but then Kyron Williams, very safe there. Josh Jacobs comes in a little bit lower because of obviously the risk of him from a legal perspective, but I've sitting here and rattled off literally 10 easy names that I could feel very comfortable with as my RB1. If I were to be able to go running back heavy and get two of those, you're potentially setting yourself up for significant success there at running back. So, and especially when you consider, again, kind of shifting towards those tier two guys, the wide receivers are very interesting in terms of we get into this weird kind of shaky area with the round two wide receivers where it's guys that have these weird quarterback situations like Drake London, obviously, like what's going to happen with Tua potentially starting there. We know that Drake London had massive upside with Michael Penix. What is going to happen with Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback? Obviously, we know in better days he was able to work with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle on a higher level, but as recent as last year, it was a little bit disturbing, right? I trust him in terms of checkdowns to Bijan Robinson, but I don't know how much I trust him to truly get the level of upside that we know Drake London has, right? So I've talked about Nico Collins in recent videos in terms of lack of potential volume. If he repeats the same type of volume that he had last year with CJ Stroud, the improved defense, right? Just really kind of capping the upside that he had because they didn't have to have a ridiculous amount of pass volume, right? Other guys here that would be a little bit, shakier would be you get into the Justin Jefferson, right? In terms of, Kyler Murray, do we trust him? And what happens if Kyler Murray does Kyler Murray things and gets injured and we're back to JJ McCarthy, right? So looking at how you could build, I mean, it's very possible to just lean on one of those safer top 5 options at wide receiver and come around in round 2. Hit running back, maybe then you come around in round 3, hit running back again, settle that up really quickly there because we've got some good mid-round depth there at wide receiver. So running back strategy is very, very clear for me in terms of being able to take advantage of this high-end depth that we have, right? And you can go a wide variety of directions with it, right? You can go with the safer option of guys in, strong offenses that have a certain level of baked in volume, like a Chase Brown or a Derrick Henry, James Cook, right? Or you could go the riskier option of the guys that have that legit top 5 upside, right? That league winning upside in a Saquon Barkley or Devon Achane. But they are, a little bit riskier because of team situations and changes going on and whatnot. But it's very intriguing. And I think that kind of takes us into this second question that I had or comment that I had from YouTube as well that I wanted to show. From Strello90 says, I want to believe in Saquon at his price point, but I'm not fully sold. And I think picking the right running back between Saquon, Achane, and Hampton could be season defining. I love Achane as a player, but Hampton seems like he has the highest touchdown upside, and we know what Saquon can do. And I think this is one that a lot of people are debating because I did a recap of draft that I did a couple weeks ago, right? And I took Achane over Saquon Barkley. And, one of the comments I received is, hey, you might regret, not going with Saquon there. And I love Saquon as well. He's a target for me. I don't think you can go wrong really with Saquon, Achane, or Hampton. But for me, the separating factor here in terms of who you would take between them is all about the level of risk that you want to take. Because I am a believer in the bounce back of Saquon. And they all actually have their own inherent risk there, right? Because with Saquon Barkley, he is, dipping up there in age, right? And he is coming off of a down season. So you could argue maybe this is teetering towards the fall off for him. I more so think that what we saw with him was a come down from a very high volume level that they had in the Super Bowl year where he had well over 340 carries in season, and then combined with the postseason, it was just massive workload there for him. So I'm not shocked he had to come down in 2025 here. In my opinion, they will get back to the bread and butter of leaning on Saquon Barkley. And I do like the fact that they added Sean Mannion as the offensive coordinator because it is a little bit shaky in terms of what we will see from the wide receivers with him because he does come from Green Bay. So we know that it can be a little bit spread around there. But from a running back perspective, that coming from Matt LaFleur, who under Josh Jacobs, or with Josh Jacobs, aggressively tilted the Packers offense to relying heavily on the run, minimizing the passes, leaning aggressively on the run, not a ton of utilization of Jordan Love at the goal line, lots of goal line opportunities there for Josh Jacobs. So if we bring over that same concept, right? And obviously we know that there are more touchdown opportunities for Jalen Hurts at the goal line, but conceptually here, we should see a nice bump in volume from Saquon Barkley under Sean Mannion. So I think it's very safe from a pure volume perspective. Achane is a very high upside play in my opinion. So if I'm feeling riskier, and I am often feeling riskier when I'm drafting this year, especially early, because I did, do a lot of leagues where, it can sometimes pay to be a little bit riskier, right? But depending on how risky you're wanting to feel, Achane's upside is theoretically ridiculous this year. When I look at him, I compared it to having a potential Christian McCaffrey type of workload. And people get very scared because they say, this offense is going to be terrible. I do question the level of overreaction that we might be having because the offense was not good in Miami last season. It wasn't good. Tua was not good. We saw literal trash. And yet we saw the same exact Devon Achane that we have seen for multiple years now in terms of offering that high upside of not volume on the ground, but being extremely productive from a pure talent perspective with volume on the ground, and then the receptions as well. And I don't think the receptions are going to go away, people. In my opinion, we should see Devon Achane as the receptions leader on this team, operating as the pseudo wide receiver one. The difference between a Devon Achane and like a, let's say Josh Jacobs, right? Because, and it's on my mind, Green Bay, right? The difference between those types of running backs, right, is that when you have a running back like Achane, Bijan Robinson, Christian McCaffrey, those are not often reliant on simply checkdowns, but they line up as receiving options and they play out of the slot and they line up wide. And we should see that continuation because while Mike McDaniel is gone, we do have Bobby Slowick, who was the passing game coordinator last season, staying on staff and becoming the offensive coordinator here. And all of this at the end of the day just kind of stems from Kyle Shanahan anyway. He is from the Kyle Shanahan team. He worked with the new Miami head coach in San Francisco under Kyle Shanahan. Obviously, that's where Mike McDaniel is. They had all worked together, right? So theoretically, while we will see a shift to his own philosophy, because it is different than Mike McDaniel, we're still going to see that same utilization of Achane, because I find it very hard to believe that a man who ran a passing game that did heavily utilize Devon Achane as a receiving option last season is suddenly going to decide, I don't want to do that. No, our freshly paid RB1, no, we're just going to line him up in the backfield and call it a day. So it's risky. But the upside in terms of the pass catching that he could have in this offense, especially because we would expect them to be playing from behind, would be significant here. So it's a high ceiling play for sure. And then with Amari Hampton falls into the perfect offensive situation. And and it's interesting because I do think he actually carries the same inherent risk that the other guys have, just different because his offense is expected to see a massive uptick in production because we have the change in offensive coordinator to Mike McDaniel. And at the same time, we're getting to a more healthy offensive line. They should get their guys back to start the season that were out last season that made everything very wonky. Although run blocking was not that bad last season, right? We saw very high upside games from Kamani Vidal, by the way. But better offensive line situation. They've reinforced it. So there should be lots of goal line opportunities. We know that Amari Hampton, despite being a big back, can catch the ball very well, can handle, it's not just catch and fall, right? There would be good yards after the catch as well. My only fear here is, and this is not a massive fear, it doesn't make me turn away from him, not pick him or anything like that. I'm perfectly cool with it. He does have some inherent risk like the other guys because it is entirely possible that he is potentially a little bit minimized in the pass game to where he's still operating the pass game. But we know that Mike McDaniel really, really likes Keaton Mitchell, right? And Keaton Mitchell has to stay on the field. He has yet to prove he can play a full season. But if he did, and Mike McDaniel is wanting to do some Devon Achane type of things, Keaton Mitchell does fit that profile. So we could see him, significantly used as a change of pace back. So while Hampton would still be the clearly back, no issue in that, trustworthy goal line opportunities, all of that good stuff. There's just a little potential chink in the armor there. And it's not as if we didn't see when Hampton did come back at the end of last season, right, from his injury. We did see Amarian Hampton cede some work to Kamani Vidal there. So it was a little bit concerning. Now, granted, it still was fine from a fantasy perspective, but the overall upside was capped. So the worry is still there that could happen there for him. So just keep that in mind, that he does have risk with him too. He's not the foolproof option here. It's kind of pick your poison. They're all great guys. And honestly, I mean, if you've got one team, go with your gut on it. If you've got multiple teams, diversify it, right? Because I'm diversifying it a little. I do like all of them a lot. My preference there, though, is HM by a smidge because I want that massive upside. I'm a true believer. I've drank the Kool-Aid, my own Kool-Aid, by the way. I started this Kool-Aid and I made it and I drink it. The Kool-Aid of him being this potential overall RB1 because of the receiving upside that he would have in this offense, because of the lack of receivers that we have there. Now going here to the chat here, because I see you guys putting in comments, and I want to get to those as well. Let's see here. Loving Life says, if I end up with Saquon, I would definitely want to handcuff him with Tank. Yeah, I agree with that one. And I'm not always where you have to, handcuff your running backs with their own handcuffs, because I like to, diversify and find some potential options that could stumble into overall RB1. And then, hey, I've got 3 RB1s there. But I don't think it's a bad strategy to handcuff with Tank Dell. Jesus, I got Tank Dell on the mind and his potential comeback with Tank Bigsby there. Because while it was a little bit last season, I saw enough to believe that he would be the direct replacement 1-for-1 in terms of a handcuff there. So I do think he would stumble into significant workload there. So for sure, that is actually one of my preferred handcuffs. Like at the end of a draft, if I'm just looking for a random pick, I'm like, hey, if Saquon were to be caught by age, Tank wouldn't be the worst pick in the world. Mike2756 says Hampton played without 2 of the best offensive linemen in the game, with both of them and Mike McDaniel as OC. Huge upside. Yeah, and that's, it's funny because sometimes I see people talk about the Chargers offensive line and how poorly it was this season, but you have to remember that wasn't their fault and there was nothing they could have done to avoid that. When you lose 2 of the league's best, it's tough to build around that, right? To thrive around that. And they did, to their credit, go and make some additional changes because there were some guys that were slacking a little bit on the offensive line in terms of healthy guys that remained, and they got some depth as well. So they made more changes. It's not just the guys coming back from the injuries. They made additional changes and added some depth as well. So overall, this unit should go back to exactly what it was before. Linda Wells says Saquon and Achane both have a history of missing games due to injury, but I trust Saquon more, and the Dolphins offense scares me as a fantasy owner. Achane hasn't been that bad, especially for a running back, to be honest. There was the rookie season, right? But he played, the rookie season where he missed the first, he started off missing 1 game, came back, was kind of eased in. Then he missed a little chunk in the middle there, but that was it. The next season after that, 17 games. Last season, 16 games. Yeah, there hasn't really. And the one that he missed was at the end of the season, so that doesn't really count, in my opinion. Achane hasn't really had injury problems. Saquon, not really. So, yeah, the injuries, I don't consider them injury risk. My injury risk guys are guys like Christian McCaffrey, just because Unfortunately, that's a big one for me as well. Christian McCaffrey is a just random side note there. I do fear that this is a scary Christian McCaffrey year. The amount of touches that he had was stupid last year. Anytime he's had like extremely high touches and finished as the overall RB1, he's suffered injuries the next season and not made it halfway through the season. Like it's been a pattern. And that's a pattern that you don't just see with Christian McCaffrey as well. Like that's a clear pattern with running backs in general. Like when you have those massive outlier years, it just increases the risk of wear and tear on the body next season. So, but yeah, I don't consider Saquon or HN injury risk guys, right? And he's little, but little backs do well. I mean, look at James Cook. He's a smaller size back, extremely reliable in terms of his health. Let's see here. Mike says HN the only weapon they have. They're gonna feed him. He's the only one. It's kind of, which again, they're tanking, man. Which is also the mild hesitation that I have about Malik Willis, just because Malik Willis can end up being technically a Justin Fields situation. But I hope that they don't go that direction, but it is a very precarious situation. But again, we're talking about the only weapon on the offense. And I know people say you don't want to draft players on bad teams. If that player is the only one that can get volume, it's not a bad bet. And if that player has been in bad offenses before, like, again, guys, this was not a prolific offense last season. It was a bad offense last season. It was bottom 8, I think, was the cutoff. That's off the top of my head. I want to say it was bottom 8 in terms of their production and points, but HM was still pumping out all season long. So he is one that I trust significantly here. From You Want Sauce says, I'm in a keeper league and going to keep Pickens and going to draft 3 running backs in the first 4 rounds. What are your thoughts? I approve of that for sure. I would say, depending on what wide receiver is on the board, maybe you go wide receiver in the first round and then just go running back, because honestly, I mean, through 4 rounds, you would be able to stack up 3 top 20 backs very easily on that one. So in my opinion, I'm cool with that for sure. And I don't mind George Pickens at all this season. It is, again, you're keeping him. So that's excellent because you're not having to have that elevated cost of the ADP that other people are having to pay for him. He's a top 10 receiver this year in terms of where he is going to be drafted. So it is a little hefty price there, but I think that's a fine direction there. Again, when I look at CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens, it's been a weird situation where I've been kind of like a little bit on the edge in terms of, do I really, it's weird drafting 2 guys that early from the same team in terms of wide receiver, same position. But at the end of the day, I do think that we're going to see a repeat in terms of the level of volume that Dallas had to throw last season, because while they've made improvements to the defense, I don't think it's going to make a leap to the point where it's going to be prolific. Average would be at best. So if they're still on the struggle bus with defense, we're still going to see very high volume from Dak Prescott there. So, and we know that we can trust him from that perspective. So I don't mind it. There is volatility in Pickens. So that's why I'm saying, hey, I think that Pickens is a good keeper, but you might want to make sure with that first round pick, maybe you secure a true wide receiver one who is going to have consistent volume, because you get more peaks and valleys with George Pickens, and the peaks are wonderful, but you can get those little valleys from him. So get someone to be your wide receiver one who's a bit more steady in terms of consistent targets there and volume, maybe less touchdowns, more consistent volume and targets there, and then get your 3 running backs. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Do not disagree with you at all on that one. Loving Life says, definitely agree on running back take. 2 running backs in the first 3 to 4 rounds for me. It's just so juicy. How can you not, right? Miles Logan says, yeah, I've been mock drafting and have noticed running backs going quickly, like good running backs, and may have to do back-to-back picks on running backs for sure. And if you have to, and if they're going off very quickly, I will say that you can pivot. Like one, you don't want to you don't want to forego that early round range at all. You need to get at least one. But I will say this because we're checking in with. Let's see here. Where is the actually? Let me look at overall. Overall, where is Quinshon Judkins? Quinshon Judkins is overall 53, right? So, so Bucky Irving, Cam Scattaboo, Quinshon Judkins are all going within that RB 52, or not RB, pick 50 to 53 range there. So you can dip into round 5 and still be able to get somebody that is a true 3-down back. Now, Bucky is not one that I trust. I just wanted to include him in case you do like Bucky. You're more than willing to do that. But if you see running backs going super quick there, and maybe you see an opportunity to kind of pivot a little bit, right? You get one running back, and maybe there's a running back run there rather than having to take, getting caught at the bottom of a tier or something. Let's Travis Etienne. Let's say that you see a running back run and there are good wide receivers on the board. Your option would be taking Travis Etienne. Maybe you bypass that and you push it back around and you go into round 5 and you get one of the guys like Quinshon Judkins, or even, push it a little bit further back and get you a DeAndre Swift or something like that, just to still be in that range that's acceptable, but not have to be at the bottom of a tier and take something that is a little less productive, right? So there's ways around it, right? But yeah, I do think that grabbing those 2 running backs early is a solid move here. Hazelnut says, I have the number 11 pick in a Superflex 12 team let me start that over. I have a number 11 pick in a 12 team Superflex. Gonna grab a top running back / wide receiver, then a quarterback like Herbert, Lawrence, Caleb. My one keeper is Tyler Warren there. I like that for sure. And then says, hey, oh yeah, let's meet the pup. My door is closed. I took a wrong strategy there. I should have known that he was going to start barking. There's the people across the street for some reason. I guess they have like family over and they were standing outside talking. And I thought I was good because he didn't notice. And I think he caught it and just started like barking because he sees people and he just loses it. I should have pulled him in here and trapped him in here with me. That's got to be my strategy moving forward here. One keeper, back to you, Hazelnut. Keeper as Tyler Warren is wonderful. So love that for sure. And then Superflex here. Yeah, I think that's a good strategy. Now, I will say that you might have to go in round 2 and get the quarterback then, but there would still be a acceptable wide receiver. I think I'd probably lean towards, depending on what wide receiver is there, maybe you lean towards, and you have 11 pick here. I think I might, with your 11 pick, probably maybe want to see what wide receiver falls there, because you could easily see maybe an Amon-Ra St. Brown fall right there. And so maybe you do that, grab wide receiver, turn around, grab a quarterback, and then dip into round 3 with the running backs. And you would still be in that range where you're still getting like, at the very least, like a Derrick Henry there in Superflex. So I think that strategy for you would be very good there with that number 11 pick. I would try and see if one of those top 4 receivers, in my opinion, with Amon-Ra being your cutoff, falls to pick number 11, because that did happen to me in a league. I got very excited and I snatched that sucker up right there, because he should go a little bit. That's my cutoff in terms of safety level for a good wide receiver 1 in round 1. So that would be the approach that I would take there. Sparky D-back says, what do you think about Jonathan Brooks over in Carolina? I have a good feeling about him. They sound like they want to get him on the field immediately. And the method that they would use to do that would be 3rd down receiving work, right? And I do think they're going to be run heavy. So I don't mind both Chuba Hubbard and Jonathan Brooks. Jonathan Brooks, ADP hasn't risen a lot. We have not gotten, thank God, we haven't gotten a lot of hype up there of his ADP being pushed up like Kenneth Gainwell, right? I love Kenneth Gainwell all offseason. The ADP got pushed up ridiculously, who I still like him, good target, right? But the ADP got stupid elevated, and we're not seeing that significantly with Jonathan Brooks. So that's a good thing. We're still getting good value on him, and we're still getting, decent value on Chuba because it's possible that Chuba could just retain his role, right? And we know that the Panthers want to be run heavy as well. We don't see a lot of aggressive pass volume out of Bryce Young there. So I think there is potential. And I like Jonathan Brooks because, again, one, handcuff, two, potential standalone value if he is going to have that third down work. And then three, he can just take the job flat out if he just looks better than Chuba Hubbard, because obviously we've seen that for multiple years now with Carolina. They will switch up the starting running back if one looks better than the other. So I do like him in drafts as well. Brevin says, found your channel this week. Thank you. Love the content. How do you feel about Derrick Henry this season? Does his age worry you? It's funny because I've been talking about Christian McCaffrey a lot. And whenever I talk about avoiding Christian McCaffrey, inevitably the response comment is, you guys always say this about CMC and Derrick Henry. And my reaction is, I have never said that about Derrick Henry a day in my life, and I never will. I think he's just built different. And I have zero fear with Derrick Henry. Age doesn't worry me. He is handling the fact that he is still handling 300 plus carries at his age, and it's not a problem whatsoever. And the fact that he was able to have the production that he had last season in what was an objectively bad season for Baltimore, because the offense was not effective to the level it should have been without Lamar Jackson, because he's Lamar Jackson, right? But the Lamar Jackson injury, and even when he came back, he wasn't quite himself, right? So that hurt the season. The offensive line was underperforming. And, if anyone's got any fears about the offensive line this season, right? Because we did have the exit of Tyler Linderbaum, and they've got some changes, right? It might take a second for the line to start gelling because of all the changes, but I think the real issues that they had in terms of the struggles with their offensive line last year, they seem to have reinforced it. So I'm not super concerned that we're going to see a massive drop off in their offensive line. And at the end of the day, a healthy Lamar Jackson is the key here, because with Derrick Henry, we know that games have to be competitive because his volume comes on the ground, not through receiving work there. And I'm very interested to see the change over in offensive coordinator as well. I have no issue with Todd Monken. I think he was perfectly fine. I love what he did with Lamar, but I am interested to see Declan Doyle and what he brings to freshen up this offense too. So I've got positive feelings about Derrick Henry. I like the value for him. I would click him in a heartbeat and feel really good about it. Age doesn't concern me. I mean, he's just been so incredibly reliable. And when you look at him on the field, you just don't physically see a drop off here. He's just built different. At this point, I'm convinced that Derrick Henry will not be, because running backs, they just fade off. Unfortunately, poor things. It's such a sad position. They just, fade off. Our greats fade off and just disappear, right? I am convinced Derrick Henry is just going to wake up one day and, after a 300 carry season that was successful, and say, oh, you know what? I think I just want to go spend time with my family. And that'll be his retirement, right? A-Rod 4 says, can I toss out last year when I contemplate taking JCM? Did injury-riddled year influence his poor performance? Also, Rachaad White's one-year deal doesn't mean he's the guy in Washington. Also, Rachaad White's one-year deal doesn't mean he's the guy in Washington now, right? I agree on that one. It's funny, it's weird because the contract for Kenneth Gainwell doesn't ring a level of concern for people because they paid him good money in Tampa Bay, right? But yet somehow the little smidgen of money that they offered Rachaad White is highly concerning. I think it's interesting. I think it's funny how contracts can be situationally used or disregarded in other situations, right? But I think with Rachaad White, we know him so well. We know that his work on the ground isn't spectacular. I don't know that I would want him to be the 3 down back of my team, right? But we know that he is an excellent blocker. He is a fine receiver. Yards after the catch are not an issue, right? So when I look at JCM and I look at Katron Allen and then the other ancillary backs on the roster, right? I know that Rachaad White is the best 3rd down back on that team. So I know he has that role for sure. Now, to what degree does he have all the early down and goal line carries versus splitting that work with a JCM? Does Katron Allen factor in? I haven't heard a lot about Katron Allen. I feel like we've been hearing more JCM talk up from beat reporters in terms of, we've heard, the rumors that he's been working on his pass protection and his receiving, because obviously that's the one area of, and he can always improve on the ground, right? But really in terms of him and his growth and progression forward as a potential starter there, it comes down to him being able to be trusted on third downs and not being pulled out of the game there. And it sounds like Washington doesn't want to have this strict, here's our early down guy and here's our third down guy. And if you see Rachaad White, you know that we're passing the ball, and they want to be a little bit more diversified here. So that would be ideal if we could get into that situation, right? I think what we saw out of JCM last year in terms of Chris Rodriguez having the goal line preference was concerning. But when JCM did get the bulk of carries, he had success. So I think there's promise there. And I think the ADP is appropriate. I think it's worth taking a shot. Obviously, I would like to see more out of training camp to try and gain more of an idea of where they're truly at. But I do think he'll have a role and an opportunity to solidify himself within this offense here. So I'm not holding last year against him. And I also think that when I'm looking at this offense having a bounce back season with Jaden Daniels, and this is just kind of speculation and thought process, right? But if I were Washington, knowing the injuries that he has incurred, right, I would want to, and how bad the offense is without him, I would want to be a little bit more cautious with JCM. I would run him more like Lamar Jackson, right? In terms of, I would try to minimize his usage at that goal line, because Lamar runs wild, right? But when they get into the red zone, they're not trying to put him in dangerous situations. So you don't see a lot of goal line touchdowns, right? You don't see a lot of touchdowns inside the 5 from him. So I would like to see Jaden Daniels transition to more of that, right? To where he's, running and scrambling and whatnot. But when it comes down to red zone, we see Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, right? So I think that could be a possibility as well, especially if the offense bounces back and we get a good amount of touchdowns from him and goal line opportunities. So I think there's promise there. That was a lot of words to say that I think there is promise there for JCM. All is not lost. The potential is there. It does sound like he has been specifically working on those areas where he is weakened. So pay attention during training camp. But as of right now, I do still think that he's a good target, right? And I think that kind of skepticism around the existence of Rachaad White being there and kind of having that pseudo RB1 role in the bag, people kind of have it as he's the RB1. This is it, 100%. That existence means that no matter what happens over the next, few weeks here, we're not going to see a massively elevated ADP for JCM. So that's good news as well, that he can still be a good value pick for us. Loving Life says, some people think a Miami tight end could blow out. Name escapes me. It's Greg Dulcich. I have tried to be a believer for years now in him, and it just never amounts to anything. It would be ironic if he finally did break out when I gave up on him. But it is possible, right? Because it seems like he is on the track to, be a potential relevant look in that offense. But it's tough to, and then granted, to be fair to tight ends, right? I think we get very spoiled with like the Colston Lovelands and the Tyler Warrens and Brock Bowers and whatnot. But traditionally, it has taken some years for tight ends to kind of acclimate and really find themselves. So I would, it's possible that he has a breakout season and plays a bigger role in this offense, especially when you consider that, again, this offense that is shifting over to Bobby Slowick, but at the end of the day still stems from Kyle Shanahan. This offense, this type of offense, does want to heavily involve a tight end, and Dulcich can fit that. So we will see there. Going back to some comments here, John says, which rookie besides Tyson and Tate and Keon, I'm guessing Keon is Concepcion. Besides Tyson, Tate, and Concepcion are worth targeting as sleepers. Well, it's easy for me. It's Boston. Denzel Boston is mine. Quarterback situation is obviously sketchy in Cleveland, but really and truly, like, Denzel Boston was one of my favorite prospects. I was higher on him, and it is entirely possible that he can be the first look at this offense in Cleveland. So I'm still holding out my hope and my dynasty shares on Denzel Boston here, being the one that comes out on top there in Cleveland. So that's my guy there. And then besides those, that's really it. I don't really feel a lot of besides that, I don't really feel a lot of and obviously in those top ones you can include Makai Lemon as well. Outside of that, man, I'm not feeling super inspired because I didn't like a lot of other landing spots. I don't believe in, Omar Cooper Jr.'s landing spot in the Jets. I mean, I still trust Garrett Wilson because Garrett Wilson has shown that he can dominate through any level of defunct Jets offense. I mean, for reference there, how trash was Justin Fields? Sorry, Justin Fields, I love you. How bad was he last season? Yet Garrett Wilson was still putting up numbers with Justin Fields. That's scary, right? He's so good in terms of being able to garner volume and be productive with that volume. So I don't have concerns. I got my concerns about Breece Hall in that offense in terms of what happened. I don't think there's going to be a ton of opportunity on the ground because I do think this is going to be a bad team. But if it's a bad team, it does benefit pass more. And so I do trust Garrett Wilson. I don't see an issue there. But beyond that, I just can't get there with Omar Cooper Jr. Like him, but the idea that we'll have enough pass production to consistently trust a secondary pass catcher there in the Jets, and then we should also see Kenyon Sadiq in there as well. I don't love it so much, unfortunately. Jumping back here down to the comments here, catch up. I'm sorry if I missed some comments here. We've got a lot, so I try to go back and see what I've missed there. But jumping down to the comments here, get some more before we wrap things up. From Bob Hope, what do you think about taking Brown and May in the 3rd and 4th rounds? I'm pro. I have a dynasty team that ironically has Drake May and AJ Brown, so I'm hoping to God that connection works. I'm pro Drake May and AJ Brown. I think what we're going to see with that New England offense is a shift in higher pass volume because there wasn't a ton to work with. And this is why I like the potential there, because I think it's important when you're looking at offenses to kind of gauge which offenses are going to increase volume, which offenses have room to increase volume, which offenses are going to try and get more efficient, right? To kind of figure out what target opportunities there really are within a team, right? And when I look at the New England Patriots, I look at a team that has a lot of room for more targets. They were operating out of efficiency last year. The schedule is a lot tougher this year. I do think that the efficiency is going to come down, and we're going to have to see Drake May throw for more volume. If he's able to throw for more volume and be just as efficient, that would be crazy MVP level. But I think it's going to come down a little bit, and we're just going to see that natural increase in targets there. So I would not be shocked if with the tougher schedule, we see a significant increase in pass attempts there. And obviously AJ Brown, I do trust, like Romeo Dobbs and whatnot. I enjoyed Kayshon Boutte last year, in prior year. I like him a lot. So but I unfortunately don't think there's enough volume there for him. So ultimately I do think Brown's going to be the clear target hog first look in this offense here. So I'm riding with it this season. I don't mind it. And we've got a nice discount on it right there with AJ Brown. So you don't have to pay a stupid price for him. It ain't a 1st round pick. So I'm good with it. Follow Rob Thomas says thoughts on Tucker Kraft. You in or you out at current cost? I'm in. I mean, my preference there would be Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland. I do have them both higher, and obviously the other two, right? But after that, it is Tucker Kraft that I do like there. I mean, realistically, Christian Watson, I am willing to take a chance at ADP on him for, a flex, right? If I had to have him as my wide receiver too, okay, but my preference would be as a flex option there. But at the end of because of, if he plays a full season, I do think the upside of a 1,200 yard and 10 touchdown season makes sense for him. But at the end of the day, we could see Tucker Kraft have the highest upside in this offense. Now, I will say this. The reason that Tucker Kraft comes behind the other guys for me is because I don't think Tucker Kraft has the ability to get to that 100 target level that the other guys have. I think when I'm looking at the top 7, those are the ones I'm most comfortable with. The top 7 tight ends ending at Kyle Pitts although technically Kyle Pitts and Harold Fannin Jr. are flipped for me. But ending at Kyle Pitts at consensus tight end 7 there, all of those guys realistically can get to 100 targets very easily. Tucker Kraft is the only one that it's a little bit tougher for because the way the ball is spread around. But he does have red zone preference. We did see that last season, so I do feel good about him at cost, not a problem. Seems like he's on track for week 1. I think it's a very fine pick. Linda Wells says, Dear Tara, kickers and DST matter. They win a lot of clutch games. Who should come off the fantasy board? As in which one first? Well, I don't know. I'm more of a, I don't think I have a preference there. I think I tend to lean a little bit more towards defense first, just because there are a lot of kickers that end up being later round kick or further back kickers that end up being in better team situations that get pushed forward. So I don't mind pushing defense first, getting a solidified higher end defense, and then pushing kicker to my last pick there. So yeah, I would say that my preference is I do kickers last is typically the way that I go. But they do matter. But I do love streaming. I'm not going to lie. I do love a set it and forget it kicker, right? But I don't mind streaming at all. Don't mind streaming at all. I think I'm more on the side of prefer streaming kickers and having more of a set it and forget it defense, in my opinion, my preference. Follower Thomas says, did you do your SFB 16 draft? How do you like your team? I did. It's a high risk team. You know, I talk about like guys of like our HN, and I left this graphic up forever. That's funny. I talk about guys like HN being riskier picks there. My Scott Fishbowl team was about as risky as you can get. I did. The intention was I am going in every single round as risky as humanly possible. I got Rashee Rice. I got Devon Achane. I was going high risk. And I leaned heavier on tight ends, which typically I don't do because I love streaming and I love a late round tight end. Oh, God, so much. Like last year, Arondé Gadsden, Harold Fannin Jr., Juwan Johnson. Oh, that was one that really came through for me. I had a lot of injuries in my Scott Fishbowl team last year, but I drafted really well with late round tight ends. And so I had zero problems covering it and making it to the playoffs. But this year I went different, which is weird for me. I drafted both Colston Loveland and Trey McBride, which was so strange for me. So strange, but we'll see how it goes. The thrill of the late round tight end, though, it does intrigue me. But I changed. I changed my ways, people. You can change. Panda of Love says 1 QB, 3 wide receiver, 2 flex, 10 team, 8 keepers with pick 10 rookie draft. Would you trade Josh Allen and Tyler Warren for would you trade Josh Allen and Tyler Warren for Drake May, Denzel Boston, and Eli Stowers? Oh, I don't know if I have the stomach to do that. I don't know that I would do that. Just because it's not a bad trade. If you want to do it, if you need to get younger at wide receiver and you want to take that risk that Denzel Boston is going to hit, that's ironic because I did not, as I was talking about Denzel Boston, I did not see this comment. So now you're putting me to the test of would I do that? I still think I like the Josh Allen and Tyler Warren side better. Just because, there's the possibility of Eli Stowers being that guy in Philadelphia. Right. But at the end of the day, you've got 2 possibles there along with Drake May. And then you've got 2 locked-ins with Josh Allen and Tyler Warren. I don't know if I would make that trade. Oh, I hate that because I love both Boston and Eli Stowers, but I prefer the Josh Allen, Tyler Warren side there. From Chaos is back here. Would you take HN over Cook and Genty? I do, yeah. But again, that's me taking heavy risks. It's very contrarian. I admittedly can say that. Like, this is not me saying like everybody has to do it. It's a risky preference that I have, and I'm fully aware that it's a risky preference that I have. Logically, Cook and Ginty are safer picks, particularly Cook more so as the safer pick there, just because of, how incredibly reliable he has been, the touchdowns. Again, I do think that the Bills offense is going to remain run heavy, in my opinion. So very safe pick there. If you prefer to go that route, I don't blame you. Ginty, again, we are trying to do the heavy lifting of relying on the offensive line to make that turnaround in Vegas, but I feel comfortable with him. But my preference is HN, but I don't fault anyone that doesn't want to mess with the Miami situation and go with Cook and Ginty, especially because with Ginty, the positive there with Ginty is that, we're just looking for more consistency on the ground because the volume was there through the air and Kirk Cousins has zero problem checking down, right? So that shouldn't be an issue. We just need the consistency on the ground there for him. And then we'll do one more question here. And then Rob Thomas says, I took too many tight ends in Scott Fishbowl. I did too. Look at it, and that's not my nature, but man, they appealed to me. They were calling my name. I almost took 3 in the first 5 rounds. I was real close to pulling the trigger on Kyle Pitts or Harold Fannin Jr. early, but I held myself back. I was like, girl, don't stray too far from the process here. Nick Taylor says, hey, Tara, I'm in a 10-team Superflex redraft 1 keeper league. Who should I use my keeper on, Lamb or Bowers? Bowers. Yeah, Bowers. And that one's pretty secure for me, just because the lack of addition, basically the addition that Vegas made at wide receiver was Jalen Naylor. We know that Bowers is going to be the first look. We know that, Kirk Cousins is tight end friendly. Hey, things could change. And Fernando Mendoza is perfectly fine if you do get that shift to Fernando Mendoza at some point. I don't see a major problem there, but Kirk Cousins is tight end friendly. Not a problem there. First look is going to go through Brock Bowers. So I do think we're probably in line for the massive Brock Bowers bounce back season there. Lamb is safe in terms of volume, right? Because even with the decrease in production he had with the addition of George Pickens last season, he was still tracking for, if you remove the injury games and whatnots where he played partials, he was still tracking for 150 targets plus, right? So there's no issue there in terms of volume. But I worry that, again, the lack of touchdown opportunities that decreased last season with the addition of George Pickens just kind of caps that overall upside. So I kind of feel like, I would rather take that risk in getting another wide receiver as my wide receiver 1, right? And just sticking with your keepers. Brock Bowers would be my preference there. But that wraps things up, guys. I'm going to go ahead and head out before this dog starts barking again and driving me crazy. Doing a show while the dog is barking in your ear is just a little bit maddening there, but we push through. I appreciate you all for sticking with me. Again, this is the Dear Miss Fantasy Show, available on all podcast platforms, and would appreciate if you would also subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's Tera Time. And then also shout out to Player Profiler. There you see the logo in the right side of the screen. That is the profile home, or the home for Player Profiler is the home for this podcast, the Dear Miss Fantasy podcast. And there's a lot of great content over there. We did talk, thank you guys for asking the dynasty questions, because we don't talk enough dynasty on here, in my opinion. But your questions help to push that forward through here. And if you have any other dynasty needs, there are tons of dynasty specific shows on Player Profiler as well for you to check out. Lots of great options there. But outside of that, I appreciate you all tuning in. One more plug that I did want to do. I started a Substack, guys. In season, you can subscribe right now. There's a free version and a paid version, right? But in season, I'm going to be using that to bring you guys more content, especially waiver wire content. So would appreciate it if you took a look at that as well. But other than that, I will be back here with you next week, same time, same place, Wednesday at 8 p.m. EST. And hopefully we will have a ton of fun training camp news coming through here and rumors for us to go through. So make sure that you stick around. I'll be back here with you next week. Have a wonderful end of your week. I will talk to you all next week. Goodbye, guys.
You know, it's important to me that all of our media be free, but it is you, the premium subscriber, with access to data analysis, the rankings, Dynasty Deluxe, DFS Dominator, the world-famous draft kit. You get that content and you make all of this possible. The free podcasts, articles, NFL draft content. So I must give a special thanks to all of our premium subscribers. You make all of this possible.